Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to pick up where we left off last week, solving some equations by elimination. Now, last week they were all set up for you, so you really just had to solve that first variable and plug in and get the other one. This week we're going to have to do a little bit more work. If you're not really comfortable with what we did last week, you might want to go back and watch that video and try that again. So, first thing, you need to make sure your x's and y's are lined up, and then everything else is lined up before you even get into this problem. So you see that we have the x's over the x's, the y's over the y's, and then our constants on the other side lined up. You don't want to get into any trouble with variables not being lined up, so just make sure that's the case. Now, let's think about what would happen here. If I did what I did last week and I added these together, I would get 10 plus 2, 12x plus 5 plus 3 is 8y equals 22. And I still have two variables. So the whole point is that we're going to combine these equations together and eliminate a variable. Right now, that doesn't happen, so this method is useless to us, the way we're doing it. So we need to think a little bit smarter here. It's kind of like saying, man, I wish something would go away here. I really wish... what could I do here that make a variable? This is 10. I really wish this was a negative 10, because then if this would go away and I have 8y equals 20, I could solve it so easily. Yeah, you can make that a negative 10, but you can't just decide it's a negative 10. Let me show you how to do that. If you want this to be, you want these to be opposites is the goal. So if you want to think, what could I do to this 2 to make it a negative 10? And the answer is, you could multiply it. You're allowed to multiply both sides of an equation by whatever you want. As long as you do it to both sides of the equation, it's fine. So I want this to be 10 and I want this to be negative 10 so that the x's cancel out. You could do it other ways, but this is the way I think makes the most sense. I'm going to multiply this whole top line by negative 5. Why negative 5? I'll show you. The reason I chose negative 5 is because when I do that now, if I multiply everything by negative 5, so negative 5 times 2, I get negative 10. That was what I was thinking, is I wanted this to be a negative 10, so I thought, well, I'd multiply by negative 5. I have to do it with everything else, but it's not really the problem here. I don't know why I said 55 there. Negative 5 times positive 5 is negative 25. Why? So I can multiply everything by negative 5 to accomplish this goal, but you can't just multiply one thing. You have to multiply everything by negative 5. So, negative 5 times 2 is negative 10. Negative 5 times 5 is negative 25. Negative 5 times negative 22, I think that's 110. Let me just make sure. Whoa, where's my calculator? There we go. Let's just make sure. Negative 22 times negative 5, 110. Yeah, I got 110. Good. So, on the left side now, I have, this is 110. Negative 10x minus 25y equals 110. And what I'm going to do is add these two equations together. So the new equation that I just created, whoa, I want it to be camera. The new equation that I just created and the equation that they gave me. So instead of using this 2x plus 5y, what I've done is I've manipulated the equation a little bit so that now when I add these two equations together, 10x and 8, those go away. And negative 25 and positive 3 makes negative 22y equals 110 and 44 is 154. You do need to make sure you add both sides. Now that we have that, we can very easily solve for y. 154 divided by negative 22 is negative 7. So y equals negative 7. Now, you have y, but you still need to go back and get x. So to do that, you need to pick an equation that looks easier. It doesn't really matter which one. You can pick the top one or the bottom one. I'm going to pick the top one, but I'm not sure it really matters in this problem. So I'm going to take that y value. I'm going to plug it in right there into the original equation. So 2x plus 5, y is now negative 7 equals negative 22. Solve this. 2x, 5 times 7 is 35. Add 35 to both sides. So if you add 35, 35 minus 22 is 13. Divide by 2. X is 13 over 2 is 6.5. Okay, so x is 6.5. Y is negative 7. Maybe. Now, on a graph, that's where they intersect. So you could just graph this in Desmos and check it. But I'm going to use my calculator and we'll check it algebraically today. So I'm going to say if x is 6.5, then I should be able to plug this in to the very first, the original equation. And I should be able to make a true statement. So let's see if I can do that. If I do 2 times 6.5 plus 5 times negative 7. So if x is 6.5 and y is negative 7, plug that in, I should get negative 22. Yup. Check it in the other one. 10 times 6.5 plus 3 times. If y is negative 7, negative 7. I should get 44. Yep, I did it. I know I'm good. Okay? Check them algebraically or check them in the graph, but check them. It has to work in both or it doesn't work at all. It's got to work in both. Check both. Okay, let's try another one. If you add them together right now, wait a minute, these aren't lined up. Before we do anything, let's flip that around. So we'll take this guy, I'll just screenshot it, and then we'll take this guy, we'll flip the order. 7x minus 3y equals negative 8. Before you get in this problem, make sure that your x's and your y's are lined up. Here they weren't, so think about that. So, if I add them together, I get 11 and negative 1. That doesn't work. Well, 4 doesn't go into 7 and 2 doesn't go into 3. So for this problem, and sometimes you have to mess with both equations. So what I'm going to do is think of common multiples. Like let's do 2 and 3. What's a common multiple between 2 and 3? 2 times 3 is 6. So let's do 6. I want this to be a positive 6, and I want this to be a negative 6. If I can do that, y's will go away. But you can't just decide they're 6 and negative 6. You need to multiply them by something. So to make this a positive 6, I'm going to multiply this whole equation by 3, both sides. To make this a negative 6, I'm going to multiply this equation by 2, both sides. And I get new equations now when I distribute. 4 times 3 is 12x plus 3 times 2 is 6y equals 3 times 14 is 42. That's the top. Second equation, 2 times 7 is 14x. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6y. And 2 times negative 8 is negative 16. There we go. Now, what we've accomplished is, by making these opposites, they cancel out. That's the whole goal. And on the left side, 14 and 12 make 26x equals 42 minus 16. Hey, would you know that is, 26. So if it's 26 and 26, then x equals 1. So x is 1. Now we got to go back up top and find y. So I'll pick the top equation. I'll plug x in right there. 4 times 1 plus 2y equals 14. 4 times 1 is 4. Subtract 4 on both sides. 14 minus 4 is 10. That means y would be 5. So I think it's 1, 5. But I'm going to check it in both equations to make sure. 4 times x is 1 plus 2 times y is 5. Should get 14. Yep. Second equation. Negative 3 times, be careful, y is 5, plus 7 times 1. I should get negative 8. Negative 8. Awesome. Okay. So in this problem, I had to mess with both equations so that they would be opposites. Now, we're going to do one more, but I want you to first see if you can find what you would multiply by, work the problem out, hit pause, and then come back. Okay, we're back. So if you look at this problem, the x's, they don't cancel. The y's, they don't cancel. But in this one, 6 goes into 12. Like, man, I wish this was positive 12 because then they would cancel. But again, you can't just make it positive 12. You have to manipulate the equation a little bit. So I'll take the top line. You work fine. But the bottom line, I have to multiply everything by something to make this 12. So to make that negative 12, I'm going to double everything. Because 2 times 6 is 12. So if I multiply everything in this second equation by 2, 2 times 5, I get 10x. 2 times negative 6 is negative 12y. And you got to double this side too to get negative 96. You need to mess with it on both sides. All right. So now, when I add them together, let's go away. That's the point. 10 minus 6, 4. Oops. That's not a pen. 4x equals 120 minus 96, 24. If 4x is 24, x is 6. And if x is 6, now I go back up top to find y. So which one looks easier? They're both pretty messy. So I'll do the top one again. Negative 6 times 6 plus 12y equals 120. Negative 6 times 6 is 36. 12y equals, if you add 36 to both sides, because this is negative, you're going to add 36, you get 156. So let's see, that's going to be 13, but I just want to make sure. 156 divided by 12 is 144 plus 12, 13. There you go, 13. Okay, so y is 13. Now we have x, we have y. Let's check it. Negative 6 times x is 6 plus 12 times y is 13. And you get, hopefully, 120. Yes. 5 times 6 minus 6 times 13. In the second equation, I should get negative 48. Yes, so I know I did it right. Okay, so manipulate the equations. Sometimes you have to do both. Cancel out a variable, solve for the other variable, and then plug it in to get the one you're still missing. Okay, it's a little tricky. It's very much like what we did last week. There's just that one extra step where you have to combine the equations together. So for this week, you need to complete your Schoology assignment. And if you need help, use the discussion board, or I'll be online on Thursdays. You can get some video chat help. But good luck and have a good week.